All right, welcome everybody to the presentation about supporting students' well-being. We have today with us Brian Walker. Brian, thank you so much for being here. He's gonna present on the role of mental health first aid in academic advising. Um, just a few things before we start the presentation. We do have captions available if you need them. You just have to click on the captions button on Zoom down here, and you can have live captioning if needed. Also, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just write them in the chat and we will address all the questions at the end of the presentation. Thanks everybody for being here, and thank you so much, Brian. I will hand it over to you. I'm very excited.
All right, thanks, Fernanda. Appreciate it. It's kind of nice to have somebody running the behind the scenes things and letting everybody in on the wait list. I feel spoiled, and so welcome everyone. It's good to have you here. Couple of disclaimers. It's always nervous being the person or the group right after lunch after one of the keynote speakers because that was amazing. And most people, I worry, might want to take a day off and say, I'm good. It's Friday and I don't need to learn anymore. So thank you for being here. The second disclaimer is I'm trying to keep my head below camera level so that you don't see my massive shoulder pad on my left side. My kids say it looks like I'm wearing a football shoulder pad. I had shoulder surgery just a couple of days ago and I still have all the poofy bandages, and they just laugh at me. They're like, Dad, you can't go on camera like that. And I'm like, I have to. I've got to teach today. So if any weird things come out of my mouth, it's because I'm medicated and coming off of surgery, and that's my disclaimer. How is that for passing the buck on? So no, I really am excited today to visit with each of you and to just share a topic that for me has really become a passion of mine. For the past year or so now, I have been heavily involved here at BYU in an academic advising role with our student athletes, but I've attended quite a few trainings and received some certifications that have focused specifically on mental health. And what I can do as an academic advisor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but what I can do in my role to better serve our students. And as I've listened to the presentations today, it made me even more excited to be able to share this today because I love the innovation that is going on. I love that technology is opening these new ways of teaching and instruction and support. And I think the place that the topic we're going to talk about for the next little bit fits is keeping us connected to the reality of the real world as well. I don't know about your different institutions, and I'm going to ask a couple questions about that here in just a minute. But I know that some of the students that come to BYU don't handle change very well, whether it's the change of coming to college from high school, from another institution to play sports at a new school, to going from the in-person to the virtual learning format. Just human beings in general, we all react to change differently. And the way we react can have an impact on our mental wellness, how we think, how we feel, how we continue to act and continue through those motions. And so hopefully the things we talk about today will help us in that transition as we're working with these students to be able to adapt and to change and to grow and to use these virtual tools in a way that will not cause added stress, but will actually enhance their experience. So I know that you are muted and I know that your cameras are off, and that is fine, but I have to feel like I get to know you just a little bit. So I'm going to ask a quick participation here, and I'd like to invite you to just quickly share your role and your institution of where you're at. So again, I don't want to take very long, but if you can see up on the screen, this is one of those mentees. I know we did it in our last session. You can type in mentee.com and hurry and type in that code. You can scan with your phone the QR code. But will you just take 1 minute, and I'd like to just get a feel for where we're all coming from, where we're joining from today, and what our roles are so that I can help relate some of our examples to the student populations that you specifically work with. If there are technology issues, please don't panic.
I'll start us off. My name is
Fernanda, can you just go ahead and type it though on the mentee?
Absolutely.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
That way we don't have to have the awkward, like, I don't want to unmute myself, I just want to sit back in the background. You can still do that, everyone. If you'll just scan, and that way you can type, it won't even have your name. Fernanda, thank you though. If I get like too
I'm
quiet
sorry
and
for
too awkward,
interrupting
you're
you.
my go-to. There we've got a few figuring it out. So we've got our colleagues from Butler, we've got LSU, we've got academics, we've got lots of LSU. Awesome. This is so awesome to be out in Utah and to still feel part of this conference going in today. We've got one from Canada. Awesome. This topic applies to international as well. Um, California, we've got West Coast, we've got advisors, we've got engineering, academic coaches. That QR code's kind of right in the way. I don't know how to get it bigger or move. We've got some marketing folks. Okay, if you haven't had a chance to put it on there, it's okay. I'm going to switch back to our presentation mode. But thank you, and thank you those that put it in the chat. That works just as well, and we're going to use that a little bit too. What I'm looking and seeing is that most of us in some form or another work with students, whether they're student athletes, whether they're students. This topic applies to anyone that works with another human being. So I hope that we can all feel like we're on the same page in that we're here to learn how to better support whatever population it is that we work with. And so I hope that today we can accomplish three things. I could probably talk about this for hours and hours, but we just learned about neurodivergent learners. I am one of those, and I assume many of you are as well. And so 20 minutes and I'm checked out. So we're going to try to simplify this into three main objectives today. For the first few minutes, I'd like to help us get this idea of a different perspective or a different understanding, a new way of thinking about the mental health pandemic that we all face in our institutions and throughout the United States, Canada as well, really anywhere in the world it's prevalent. I then want to take us to the idea of what mental health first aid is and how it can provide an early intervention system to individuals who are struggling with these mental health challenges. So we'll start connecting the idea of what mental health first aid is to this pandemic that we see. And then finally, I'd like to take some of the specific skills that you learn as a mental health first aider and apply them to how they can be used in the academic world, whether that is as an advisor, a social media accountant, a development specialist. As I'm seeing some of these titles, I think that there will be room for any and every title and person to be able to apply these five skills that we're going to learn today. So some take home, some hands-on that you can actually begin practicing. So let's just start first with a little activity about perspective, okay? I'm going to ask that you have your chat open so that you can see it, so that we can quickly get a poll, so to speak, of what our natural perspective is. So I'm going to flash a picture up on the screen. It's going to be up there for 1.5 seconds, not very long, and that's by design. And then I'd like you to just simply tap in the chat, type in the chat, not tap, what you see. So here's our first example, and we're going to do 4 of them. So the first picture is right here. What is it that you see? Will you go ahead and just quickly type in the chat what you saw? Did you see a young lady or did you see an old lady? We're seeing responses. Young, both, young, old, young. Pretty good mixture, okay? Don't worry, you're both right. This is not a quiz. You don't get points for being right or wrong. It's just simply that our eyes naturally see one or the other first. If I pull it up now, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you look at what looks like a feather up at the top and come down, that is the young woman's hair. She's looking away, the little indentation in her eyelash and her nose, and then her cheekbone. If you don't see that, instead you see an older woman with a rather large nose, and down next to her ruffles is like a scarf in her mouth. That's fine too. Hopefully by pointing those two things out though, you can now see both. Okay, let's try another one. Here's the picture. First thing that you see. Did you see a gentleman or did you see a family? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Man, a family on a dog. Good observation. We got some quick eyes. Okay, it's looking like the majority, the first impression is that they're able to see the man. He's standing in one of those poses with his hand on his lapel. But if you look a little closer where the man's nose is, it's actually an old man standing there with a cane. Next to him is a young lady. Looks like she's holding a little baby in a long flowing dress or skirt. And then there's a dog laying by the hearth on the ground. And again, if we were in person or if I could see your cameras, it would be fun to see your faces like, oh, I see it now. Or I'm sure there's some are like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I still don't see it. That's fine. Hopefully it's starting to again make sense that there really are two different sides of the picture or the coin that we can see. Two more. Here's our third picture. Did you see an older couple or did you see a musician? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Some that have maybe seen this before, they're seeing both right away. Some that are seeing an older couple. One sees a musician, a couple, both. Good. This is one that hopefully we've either naturally started learning to see both. We're looking for both, or maybe we've seen it before. Wonderful. So again, you can see the two couples staring at each other. Or if you look at the person on the right, it's actually a gentleman playing the guitar with a sombrero. He's got a friend that looks like next to him listening, and in the very background in the little eyelet of the wall is a young lady standing out to listen as well. Okay, last one. I think we're getting the point of how quickly we can start seeing multiple things from the same picture. Here's our last one. Did you see a shepherd boy or a mustache man? Oh, I think we are training you well. We're getting lots more boths. We're seeing the mustache boy. We're seeing the shepherd boy. Let's take a little closer look. For me, the mustache man is the one that stood out first, right? So the little boy's sleeves are the mustache. The houses look like his eyes. The tree stump is the nose. But as you look a little closer, you can see a shepherd boy sitting here in the fields, the sheep around him, the two huts in the back. Okay, hopefully that's kind of a fun little activity about perspective. So the question then becomes, so what? What does this have anything to do with academics or with mental health? And the first objective that I'd like to propose is that one, there are two ways to see every situation, and that as we start focusing in and seeing the bigger picture or the alternate picture, it becomes very hard for us to unsee it. And that would be my hope at the end of this as we talk about mental health first aid and working with our students, that you can't help but see it anymore. So just a quick review quiz. If I were to show you those same four questions, or pictures, not questions, sorry. Again, if I did it very quickly, I'm curious if you can see both. Again, you don't need to type, but do you see both the profile of the man and the family in this picture? Do you see the old woman and the young woman in this picture? Do you see the old couple as well as the musician? And do you see the mustache man as well as the shepherd boy? Hopefully you do. Okay, so that's our first thought of this perspective. Now let's talk about how it relates to mental health. I hope that none of you live under a rock and don't realize that we have an issue in the United States, in universities, in our youth, in our adults, really in every population and every demographic that you can think of, that there are struggles with mental health. Whether those are diagnosable disorders or whether they're just simply challenges that have not been diagnosed, it's everywhere. And so I want to just share a few stats with you that I hope kind of drive this idea home of why we as academic professionals need to be aware of this pandemic. Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time on these because I don't want to bore you with data, but I also, some of these numbers are really staggering, really shocking to me the more I read them. So first, the neuropsychiatric disorders, so anything to do with mental behavioral disorders, they're the leading cause of disability in the United States. That's across any institution, any industry, anything you can think of. 1 in 5 adults will experience some kind of mental health disorder at some point in their life. We have 30 people, it looks like, logged in right now. That means we could pick any 6 of you, and chances are one of you will have some type of mental challenge that you've been working with or will have in your life. I thought this one was very interesting. The age group that we work with as young adults, ages 18 to 24 in college, 75% of people who will have some type of mental health challenge, it will occur by the age of 24. So it's not surprising that some of your students that you work with are finding out for the first time that they're struggling with their mental health. Some may have just recently learned that they're struggling with that. And some, it might come towards their end of their college experience. And it, again, that shocking effect, that change that suddenly is different, and it can be a difficult time to be able to deal with and not know how to deal with it. As we look into specifically higher education, this was a study that was done 2 years ago. In 2022, they interviewed 54,000 undergraduate students. 77% of them met the criteria for moderate to severe psychological distress. That's a lot. Even if you're not a stats person, well over 3/4 of the population is struggling with these types of challenges. 1 in 7 of those said that they had some type of suicidal ideation, or at least thought about the idea of ending their life. And 87% of them said that their primary source of stress was school. Now, again, we sometimes joke how school can be stressful, but it's stressful to the point that it is causing disruption in our students' lives to where they're having difficulties handling the stress and functioning. And that's why it becomes such a hot topic or an important priority. And the final stat, 89% of those students said that their academic challenges were actually an effect of their mental health. This would be a great debate and a great discussion to have. Is it the school that causes the mental health, or is it the mental health that causes the school challenges, the academic challenges? I don't know. And there isn't data that shows the chicken before the egg type conclusion, but I hope that it sends a pretty clear message that almost all of our students who come in for some type of academic support, it's very likely that they're struggling with some type of mental health challenge as well. And so by us being aware of that, recognizing that, knowing how to recognize that, we hopefully can provide a better service for whatever need that student needs. One of the solutions that comes to mind for most people is, well, we just need more therapists then. That's great, except currently when we talk about caseloads, each therapist is averaging anywhere from 2,000 to 3,500 clients or caseloads on their plate. And so even if a school had the resources to hire dozens more counselors, it would never feel the need for all of those that need some type of mental health support. There's a lot of data as well that nearly 70% of individuals who struggle with mental health challenges don't divulge it to anyone. So these are the numbers that we know of who have come forth and said, I need help. There's a whole nother population who keep that to themselves or don't want to share or don't want to ask for help. And so just hiring more counselors is not going to help, and it's not going to dwindle the numbers. It's just going to help those numbers become even more for more people. So a lot of universities, a lot of institutions have tried to think outside the box. They've tried to look at alternative solutions to say, what can we do to help for those especially who don't need therapy? Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they've had a life experience that they need help grieving and getting through, and after a few days or a couple of weeks, whatever the timeline might be, they're fine. Isn't there some way that we can help that? Because that's a huge majority of this population. And then also get the ones that do need therapy or need some long-term professional care to have better access to that. And I would propose that there is, and that's where some of these ideas and these programs have started to come, to show up around the country. So one of those that I want to focus on today is mental health first aid. It's the one that I'm certified as an instructor in. I've received certifications as a first aider in both the youth and the adult programs to, again, just bring awareness to what we can do as individuals, as regular people, so to speak, to aid individuals who are struggling in this area. So I want to share just a little bit about what this program is and does. And again, there's others like it. This is just the one that I'm most familiar with. And it's the one that I've seen the most success with, in that I use these skills every single day. We talked about can't unsee it. I go to the grocery store now, and almost instantly you can see both sides of, hey, this person's having a rough day. I wish I had more time. I could do more with them. So let me just introduce to you just a little bit about the concept of what mental health first aid is. And then we'll again look at how we can apply some of the principles that are taught through this program. So the key word for mental health first aid is it's a early intervention training. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but many programs that you've probably heard of are reactionary type programs, or they focus on one specific type of mental health challenge. Mental health first aid focuses on the broad spectrum, everything from non-crisis modes to crisis modes, from suicide to anxiety, from depression to trauma to whatever ends of the spectrum you can think of. It helps you understand that the sooner that we can be aware of what's going on, the sooner we can get over our biases and stigmas that exist everywhere in the mental health realm, that we can provide a first line of support to assist these individuals. That the sooner we can do that, the more likely they're going to have a better outcome. They're going to be able to receive treatment and to not experience the negative consequences that come from these types of challenges in their life. And then we also provide an assistant, an advocate, a catalyst for helping them get the resources that they need that we just can't provide, again, on our own. And so let me show you this graphic, and then I want to illustrate what this principle might look like. Okay, so we know that the mental health spectrum is a different level of starting signs and symptoms all the way to a diagnosed illness or disorder. And again, the focus of mental health first aid is to identify those signs and symptoms early and get that person the treatment and support that they need that can be offered by anyone. Okay, and so the reason it's called mental health first aid is because it takes the principle of providing first aid. I can't do a show of hands, but I would guess that many of you have had some type of first aid or CPR training, right? I would also dare guess that none of you in this group, from what we posted on the little screen a minute ago, are medical doctors. And yet, in certain circumstances, each of you would feel very comfortable providing a basic level of physical first aid, whether that's someone got a cut, whether that's someone who has a broken arm and you rush them to the emergency room. And if you've had CPR training, again, hopefully you've never had to use it, but the idea is to be comfortable that if you come across a situation that life-saving intervention is needed, you can step in as a trained first responder and give that person the support they need until other medical personnel arrive. So I hope that isn't too foreign of a vocabulary to share. Let me just kind of put it in an illustrative concept, and I'm going to use my family, if that's okay. So this is my cute little family, my wife, Katie. We have 3 kids, Tayden, McCoy, and Lucy. And I'll use each of them as an example of how this idea of physical first aid can be applied to mental health first aid. So I'm going to start with my 8-year-old McCoy. If any of you have a middle child, I don't know if this is the same for you, but he is my bumps and bruises and cuts every second of the day child. He gets his shoes on and he gets cut and needs a Band-Aid. He goes outside and he falls and scrapes his arm and he needs a Band-Aid. He gets into bed at night and falls out of his bed and bumps his head and he needs a Band-Aid. I almost have to have a second job just to supply the bandages in our house for McCoy to be able to keep up with these minor physical injuries. They are minor and yet they require attention. We don't want to have a cut or a scrape fester and get infection and then have to go on to serious more care. And so I feel very confident and comfortable as his dad applying first aid to a cut, to a scrape, to a burn. If we were to use the mental health first aid language, this is a non-crisis situation. I am fully capable and qualified to provide early intervention, to take care of the situation, to try to help him prevent further episodes of this. I've considered wrapping him in bubble tape and sending him off to school. We haven't got quite to that point yet, but have strongly considered it on some days. But that is something that very easily any of us could do for any individual that we came across that needed some minor intervention, some tips on how to prevent that's a non-crisis mode. Okay. The second stage of mental health first aid is to address worsening signs and symptoms. So this is my 10-year-old son, McCoy. Sorry, Tayden. I mix their names up all the time. They correct me on that all the time. He had a little incident last year that was, I was working from home that day, and my wife came up the stairs and she said, "I need you to come down. I think we have an incident." And I was like, "Oh boy, what kind of an incident?" She says, "Well, just come see. I think he's got a broken toe. It's like, oh, whatever. He's probably just got a scratch and he'll be fine. And I go down the stairs, and sure enough, his toe is pointed a direction. I don't know if I can do it with my finger. That toes are not meant to turn. Very quickly, without being a doctor, I knew, okay, this is probably a broken toe, dislocated. It just doesn't look right. We need to do something. Okay. It's not a crisis mode. I didn't feel like it was 911 worthy. I didn't need to call and have an ambulance come and transport him to the hospital. But I couldn't just put a Band-Aid on it or put some Neosporin and say, you'll be fine. I knew instantly that we needed to intervene and we needed to get him some treatment. So take him to the emergency room. They reset his toe. Lots of fun sounds coming from the emergency room as they worked on his toe because it was very painful, and he was fine, right? So again, it was a little more scary than the first situation. It was something that I knew I was not qualified to treat or to cure, but I could provide that early intervention and get him the treatment that he needed. The final example happened a couple years ago with my daughter Lucy. She's 5 now, and this happened when she was 2. We were sitting around after family dinner, starting to get ready for bed. My wife was holding her on her lap, and suddenly she seized up. So if any of you have experienced a grand mal seizure where she's completely incoherent, her body is shaking, eyes rolled up into her head, about the worst situation you can imagine as a parent, I was freaking out. We had no idea what to do. We immediately knew that this was a crisis situation. We immediately called 911. We said, our daughter is unconscious. She is not breathing. Her face at this point had started to turn blue. She had stopped seizing. They asked, how long has it been? We're like, I don't know, maybe a minute. And they said, okay, get her down on the floor and we're going to teach you how to administer CPR to an infant. And I was like, no, this cannot be happening to me right now. And again, it turned out just fine. She actually gained consciousness right as we were about to administer CPR. But it was a situation that, again, I was in no way qualified for to treat. But I'm glad that I had some basic first aid training to call 911 in an emergency and to follow the directions of the operator to be able to assist that person until emergency personnel could get there. And so each of those situations are examples of how mental health first aid not treats, that's not the word I'm looking for, but prepares an individual to be ready to act in any of these types of situations. So let me just kind of go through some of those things that they're taught, and then we'll apply them to advising. So I'm going to put them all up here on the screen so that you can kind of see the 5 areas that a person gets trained in. The first is observation, just simply being aware of what is going on, different changes in a person's behavior, types of situations that sometimes I think in our busy lives, we just kind of walk right through or we're submersed in, and we don't really take the time to observe what's going on around us. They talk and teach a lot about assessing the situation. So not just observing, but actually analyzing what is going on here. Are there signs and symptoms? Are there signals? Are there things that are telling me I should be focusing in on something? There might be a potential problem here. We're going to go over that step in a minute, and I'll show you how fun it is to be able to do that without having to put a lot of effort into it. It's kind of fun. The third one is one that most of us don't do, and it is to just simply act. Oftentimes we see things, we hear things, we know that something is going on, but we're nervous to act. Maybe that's because we don't know how to act. Maybe it's because we're scared we might do harm, whatever it might be. But specifically, mental health first aid teaches a 5-step action plan that you can implement and feel very comfortable and confident that you can do something to assist. And then the last 2, the offer and the encourage, is once you've assessed and once you've acted and know kind of what the next steps need to be, you can then stay with that person and help them get the kind of help and the care that they need, whatever that situation asks for. So that's a very brief introduction to mental health first aid. But I want to share with you just again what that might look like in our advising roles, or again, whether you're an advisor by title or just your interactions with students, with people, with whatever form of communication you have with them. these opportunities are abundant to be able to recognize these. And so to protect the integrity of the mental health first aid vocabulary, since this isn't an official certification training meeting, I've changed the words just a little bit. They have the same meaning, the skills are the same, but I've tried to make them all into A words to go with our advising. In fact, I get to present this at the 4A conference in Las Vegas this summer, which is also kind of why I got stuck on the A words. So I'm going to put them up here. Again, these are my words, my versions to express the skills that we need as advisors or can need and use to better serve our students. So they are being acutely aware, being prepared to approach and to ask, being ready to actively listen, be able to acknowledge, and then to apply and assist. And we're going to go through each one of these and talk just a little bit about what that looks like, some things that you can start doing right now, some things that I would encourage you to continue to practice and get better at, and why those can be such powerful tools. Okay. The first point that I want to make, though, is this is not a linear process. This is not a do step one and then step two and then step three. Our lives just don't work that way, right? We've talked a lot about change today. We've talked a lot about adjusting to different things and seeing things in a new light. When we're working with people, the same principle applies. And so you could be using any one of these 5 skills at any given time, just depending on the situation. I would like to suggest that the one that you'll use first and most often and continually throughout any interaction is being acutely aware of what's going on. Being aware of what's changing, of what the situation is like, other people who might join into the situation. And as you're doing that, you're constantly analyzing which step do I need to be focusing on at this given time. So if we were to draw it into a diagram, it would probably look more like this, with lots of different moving parts happening all at the same time, looking back and forth, going from actively listening to maybe asking a question, to acknowledging the answer, to assessing again, and then applying information. And it sounds really confusing, but again, I can tell you from having done this for a little while, it's amazing how natural it becomes, just like those pictures that we looked at the very beginning. You almost stop even having to think about what you're doing as long as you're opening your eyes and trying to be aware. So let me share some ideas that can maybe help bring this home a little bit or make it a little less confusing in this short time that we have to talk about it. So when we talk about being acutely aware, some other phrases that maybe you've heard, and again, they all mean similar things, right? Seeing the face behind the mask, reading between the lines, seeing the bigger picture. If you've seen Lion King 1.5, Timon is encouraged to look beyond what you can see, and he takes it to an extreme, right? But that's what we're talking about here. We're saying, here's a situation, and instead of only looking at the obvious or the thing that anyone can see, this student has a poor grade. This student is about to get kicked out of class because he never attends. Great. But what's going on behind that? What is the cause of that? Is there something there that could be contributing to that type of behavior? Okay. One advice that I'll give you, or a couple pieces of advice, is be careful about implementing your biases, your stereotypes, labels, and emotions. What I mean by that is if we've got a repeat customer, so to speak, a student who is always on academic warning or always in trouble academically, sometimes our tendency can be, oh no, not this person again. Or we see something that is very obvious, like, oh boy, here comes that, and we attach a label to them. If we're doing that, we've already shut ourselves off from being aware of what could be going on. We need to have an open mind. We need to be aware of what might be going on that's not so obvious. And when we look for these signs and signals, we need to make sure that it's something that is not that person's normal. I'll get to that in just a second. So these are some of the things that we can look for. And I'm going to invite you to use your the chat feature for just a minute to give some examples of things that you have seen that you can think of. So when we talk about signs and symptoms, we talk about 4 domains or 4 areas that we can observe and be aware of. 2 of them we can see, right? The appearance, their actions, their behaviors. We can see how they're dressed. We can see how they're acting, the things that they're doing. The other two are not so easy because we can't see them. They come in conversation. They come in interaction through whether it might be an email or a text message, a phone call, or just a conversation in person. And that is, how are they thinking? How are they feeling? Okay, so real quickly in the chat, will you write or type something that you have seen or you could think of that might be a signal or a sign that something is a little off with this person? And we're going to start with the first category, their appearance. What is something that you might see appearance-wise that might say, hey, that's not quite like their normal? Will you just type it in the chat real fast? No makeup, stoic looking, unshowered. Those are the first three that are on my list. I'm just gonna go with those real quick, right? If we don't shower for one day, does that mean that we're experiencing a mental health challenge? Probably not, right? Dirty clothes just popped up. If I forgot to do my laundry yesterday, does that mean that I'm struggling with a major bout of depression? Probably not, right? But as we look at some other words to describe maybe the intensity, the frequency, or the impact that those things are having on this individual, now we might start raising it up the line of concern. Okay. A normally well-dressed student in wrinkled or old clothes. Thank you, Michelle. I love that because that's probably not their norm. You recognize that this person is usually pretty well put together, and now they come in their pajamas and their hair is a mess, and they normally wear makeup, but they're now not. It could be an indicator that something is going on. Okay. For time's sake, I'm not going to go through the other three, but I hope you can start getting some ideas of certain actions. Maybe someone who is very outgoing, very friendly, comes in and they sit down in your chair and they're slumped down and they're looking down at the floor. Those are fairly obvious actions or behaviors or signs that we can see that something might be a little off. Okay. Same with the thoughts and the feelings as they're talking, as you're communicating with them, and as they're sharing things that are maybe a little off topic, a little not like themselves. I hope that it just simply raises an awareness that, hey, there might be something going on here just a little bit. So let me share a tip with you. And this is the best and easiest way for me to describe it. And that is simply pay attention to your spidey senses. There is no handbook of what is a sign and what is a signal and what is not. There's no number of occurrences that says if a person wears a hoodie today for 5 days in a row, they're automatically labeled as having a mental health challenge. It's simply, you'll know it, you'll feel it because it's different than what you're used to in their interaction. So that's the part that I wanted to share about being aware, is pay attention to your spidey senses and what's going on. I want to touch on this just really quickly because I think it's a really great analogy. That's a lot of stuff to pay attention to, right? 4 domains, different frequencies, intensities. What if I don't even know this person? Guys, our human body is really good at doing a lot of this without even thinking about it. If you were to think about driving to work today or another day, since this is a virtual conference, if you think about all the things that we do when we're driving a car, turning it on, using our blinkers, our windshield wipers, lights, monitoring traffic, looking for our exit, listening to music, following the GPS, maybe texting once in a while. At any given time, we're doing 20 or 30 things at the same time, and we're not even thinking twice about it. In fact, we're probably thinking about what are we going to do at work today, or what just happened at home that I'm getting away from, or whatever it might be. The same principle applies when we're practicing being aware. We suddenly just start seeing things without even consciously having to think about it. And that's the invitation that I would give you, is to be more aware of what is going on as you're interacting with these student athletes. The second one and the rest, I'm going to go just a little bit quicker, because if there's nothing else that you get out of this presentation today, it would be simply just be more aware of what's going on behind the scenes with your student athletes. As you notice something, this is probably the next hardest step, and that is to actually approach. Again, just some simple advice. As you're going up to them, as you're feeling the urge to start up a conversation or ask them, just be aware. Be aware of the situation. Is it safe? Is it a good environment? Would it be better to Ask them about it in a more private location, or is there enough time that if you start asking questions, you can sit and listen to the answers? And again, a lot of that's going to depend on your relationship. If you know this person well, it might be a little easier to approach them. If you've never seen them or heard them in your life and you just come across them on the street, you might approach them just a little bit differently. But again, that is a skill that can be learned and that can become much more comfortable to all of us if it's not already. When we go to ask somebody, what do we say? Right? Oh, I notice something's going on. I kind of know you, but I'm not sure what to say. I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to make them embarrassed. You guys, the biggest thing you can do is just do something. There is no right or wrong way. Sure, there's better ways than others, but most of us, I hope, wouldn't just walk away and say, oh man, that person needed help. I hope they find some someday. Okay, and so we can learn how to ask, how to approach them. I'll give you again a couple of hints, and that is your tone makes way more of a difference than what you actually say. The way that you show that you're ready to listen, that you care, using statements like, I noticed that you looked a little differently today. Is everything okay? You know, I'm concerned that I haven't seen you in class. I'm concerned I haven't seen you at the activities that we've been going. What's going on? Do you want to talk about it? Just giving them an opportunity to know that you notice them, that you recognize something about them, and that you're willing to listen if they want to talk. Okay, we've heard a lot about open-ended questions. Just my favorite examples, right? You can walk right up to somebody, hey, how's it going today? And standard answer, I'm fine, and you're gone before you even hear the answer. Don't fall for that. You guys, be better than that. Know that there's more to most people than just being fine, even if it's a good fine. Ask them, what's good about today? What have you been up to today? What's going on? Do you want to talk about it? Those kinds of things. I'm not going to give a whole lecture on open-ended questions, but we could, and I think you're already good at those, or you wouldn't be in the positions that you are in right now. And the last, it kind of feels like it contradicts my other statement of asking I statements, but keep yourself out of the conversation. This is their opportunity to talk about them. Don't try to one up them on your story. Don't, oh, I know exactly how that feels when I was, and sharing your story. Just be ready to sit back and do the next step, and that is to listen. And again, I think we all know that there's a difference between hearing someone talk and actually listening to what they're saying. Keep yourself out of it. This is a great opportunity to practice your verbal and nonverbal cues of just saying, I'm here, I have time, I'm ready to listen, and I'm not going to critique anything you say. Just share with me. This is a little graphic that one of my coworkers shared with me, and I love it. I love the way she titled it of Never Forget Them. As we're listening, do these things and don't do some of these things. And again, these will be in the slides for later, but the whole point is to help them share whatever it is that is causing them distress, letting them share with you information that you can then at a later time know how to then proceed if they want that type of help. Okay. I said this a lot, but it really is the number one tip for most of these. Just keep yourself out of it. They've invited you into their world, their place. You're a guest there. So just sit back and listen, keep the conversation going. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say or your answers or your solutions. Just share that opportunity with them to let them share with you what they want to share. The last two is acknowledge. So often I'll hear this in a lecture or a presentation. A student will, or a professor will ask a question, and the student will give a great answer, and they won't even say, thank you for that great answer, and acknowledge that the person did something that was maybe a little nervous for them. Always acknowledge and thank them for sharing this information with them. They really have opened up to you. They've presented a vulnerable side of themselves to you, and you might be a complete stranger. That's not an easy thing for them to do, just as it's not an easy thing for you to maybe have approached them and asked them. And so always be grateful and express that gratitude to them. And as we continue the conversation, one of the phrases that mental health first aid teaches a lot is hope with facts, that we're trying to help them know that we're here for you, there's help available, you don't have to go through this alone, there's solutions, I can help you find those, asking them what's the next step. There's a list a mile long that we could go off, but the one caution that I would give you is be careful about providing empty promises. My favorite are the disaster movies when the hero's going to rush off to this foreign planet and do this miraculous deed. And before they go, they promise their loved ones, don't worry, I'll be back, I promise. It's like, really, you have no control over that. You're about to go off and do some ridiculous thing. Don't do that with these individuals either. Oh, you'll be just fine. You'll get over this. Maybe they won't be just fine. Maybe it's not something that they can just get over with. And so, again, as we're in the acknowledgement stage, we're simply being there with them. We're helping them know that there is solutions or there are next steps and that we'll be there for them. We can't promise them anything. And finally, the last is to simply apply and assist. This is where you're training the skills as an advisor, as a marketing, as a whatever it is that you are comes into play. Now that you know the situation, now that you've shared and gathered what this person is going through, you have an idea of what they want or what they need, you can now start applying those skills, the resources, you might get others involved, but to help them to be able to find the solutions that they need. It's again a fine line between enabling them and doing it for them and letting them do some of these things. And I would say the number one tip that I would give you is just let them know that you're there to do it with them, that you're going to whatever that next step is, be there to support them, be able to find those resources, provide that information, whatever it might be. So just as a very quick summary, and then we have just a couple minutes if you have questions, but hopefully you've gained an understanding a little bit about the mental health challenges right now in every institution, every industry. It's higher than it's ever been. The need for more individuals, counselors, first responders is just ever growing. We need all the help that we can get for these individuals. This first responder terminology, being able to provide initial support and intervention are the way I think that can have the biggest impact. It requires very little training. It has a huge impact because of the stage of intervention, that early stage, and it can provide the support that these individuals need. And again, things like mental health first aid that teaches specific skills of how to address these situations can be applied to any industry, and especially us as academic advisors in the academic world. We're the ones that usually have the first contact with these student athletes. They'll talk to us about things that they won't talk to with their coaches or their parents or their roommates, because there's so many different reasons for that. But I hope that you can become those type of people that can notice the need and then be able to provide the support for that. So in closing, I know that Fernanda has I just forgot what it's called, but I've got it on my slide too. So let me just show this to you real quick. If any of you are interested in becoming certified in mental health first aid, this will be in the PowerPoint. You can scan that, and I'm happy to send you any information that you want. It's one of my favorite things to do outside of my regular day job, is to just help people really get in-depth training into this. So feel free, I'll just leave that up for just a second. You can scan it and just give me your email. I'll send it to you later. And then Fernanda, you said that you had this. Was this the scanner that you wanted for their evaluation?
Yes, thank you for having that.
Okay.
That's the one. If you guys want to just also fill out this survey about this amazing presentation, Brian, thank you so much. This is such an important topic, and we really can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing your wisdom with us. As educators, this should be, a mandatory training. So I definitely took a picture, and I'm gonna look more into that. Thank you so much. And we are almost out of time, but do you wanna see if anybody has any questions or anything before we leave?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to put them in the chat. I'm happy. Am I okay, Fernanda, to just put my email address in the chat? And then if anyone
Absolutely, absolutely.
wants to, that might be an easier way so that you don't have to think on the spot. It's one-handed typing. It's a little slow. Give me just a second here.
I hope your shoulder feels better soon.
It's getting there. So that's my email address. Again, if you have any questions about any of it, it's just something that I have seen a great value in. We've started implementing it here at BYU in our athletics department, in our graduate programs. I'm currently working with Major League Baseball, who are implementing it in their training and nutrition programs, because you would be shocked at the #1 mental health challenge in Major League Baseball, and it's eating disorders. And grown
Wow.
men who do not want to talk about their emotions and feelings around eating. And it's just, again, it's powerful. It's powerful to be able to break down kind of those barriers and have discussions about what's really going on and get people help when a lot of the help is actually pretty simple. It's not a major, oh, I've got to go see a shrink now.
Yeah.
It's really fun to be able to be
Thank you
part
so
of. So,
much for sharing that. And, you know, the awareness is so important. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This
yeah.
was awesome. I loved it. And good luck on your presentation at the NPRA. All right, I'm going to end the meeting now for all. Thank you guys so much for being here. All right.